Do you ever have a day where you're just socializing with friends or maybe in meetings all day and you're listening a lot and you feel absolutely exhausted by the end of the day? Well, there's actually something called listening fatigue, and Dr. Gnewikow tells us all about it. Check this out. Dr. G, I know after a long day of just sitting around but being at meetings and concentrating, I can feel exhausted by the end of the day. Why is that? And if I'm concentrating so hard and listening, is that harder for people with hearing loss?
Yeah, I think it is. I think I'm a perfect example. I come home at the end of the day and I just tell my wife, I am exhausted. Well, I have a hearing loss and I spend my whole day communicating with people. It's called listening fatigue. So our brain takes energy to make decisions. We have to remember things, we have to use logic and come to certain conclusions. And just like your cell phone or your laptop, the more things you do with it, the more energy you use. And your brain is doing the same thing. So what happens when you have a hearing loss? And so you have to use a good bit of energy initially just to figure out what they said. And once you've used the energy for that, now you've got to use energy with logic and putting things together and trying to come to certain conclusions. So if you go to a meeting and you had to concentrate all day, or maybe you're in a job where you're counseling people and you're talking with them all day, and you've got a hearing loss, it really does take a toll. NIH, National Institutes of Health in Washington, D.C., in 2017 put out a report where they basically said people that have hearing loss have significantly more listening fatigue than the average person. And the other thing they found was that the recovery time is longer. So you may go home and you've got good hearing and say, I'm really tired from listening all day, but then after a while you recover. But with a hearing loss, it really takes longer. And sometimes you can have additional fatigue, which you may think comes from listening, but may come from things related to the fact that you didn't hear. Like your employer says, you know, you didn't do a very good job on that. I explained that to you 2 or 3 times, but that's what I thought I heard. And we know that stress also increases our fatigue. So now you've got the stress involved in when you didn't understand something, and the stress involved in trying to figure out what they said. So, of course, the question is, if you hear better, does that mean that you might have less listening fatigue? There have been some research studies done on that. Holman et al., I can't remember the other author, they did a study of a number of research programs on hearing loss and fatigue and the conclusions they came to. And they did a survey of the literature, and they found that in the majority of those cases, people who heard better using hearing aids actually had less listening fatigue. Hornsby at the medical school at Vanderbilt University also did something similar to that, and they actually tested it, and their conclusion was the same, that people who do something about their hearing are less likely to have the same amount of fatigue. So the bottom line is, you know, if you come home at the end of the day and you are just totally worn out, well, maybe it was because you were on a construction job, but maybe you were doing a job where you weren't doing manual labor, but you were really doing intellectual labor, where you were using a lot more energy on your brain to figure things out. So if you see an unusual issue there, you might want to see your doctor or your audiologist and have your hearing checked, because it really may be that even with a mild hearing loss, you may be having listener's fatigue.
Fascinating. And to learn more, give the folks at Audiology Hearing Aid Associates a call. In Lynchburg, their number is 434-528-4245. In Danville, you can reach them at 434-799-6288. You can also find out more online at digitalhearingforyou.com.